So now, going back to the collaboration between Patronato and CIMMYT, I want to take the opportunity to ask some of you about how can we strengthen these type of collaborations between farmer organizations and the research institutions in your country. So I will start with Dr. Bedada. Do you think you could see in the future something like this happening in Ethiopia?
In the future, that may happen in the far future, but currently it's just the opposite because farmers or research, I think the big support comes from the government. And currently regarding wheat, you know, we import 1/3 of wheat for our food security. And now this year, last October, the government has started irrigated wheat in lowland river basins. And they started with 100,000. And in 3 years, the plan is to reach over 1 million. This is a big plan. And I have seen some of the areas. These are agro-pastoralists or pastoralists in these lowland areas. And it's amazing that they are taking the responsibility, organize themselves, and doing the job. And they produce for commercial use and also for seed purpose. So next off-season, usually this is irrigated wheat will be done in the off-season, around October, November. And we'll see more area developed and more organized pastoralists working on this. And this is really good for Ethiopia.
Yeah, we see that in Ethiopia over the last 10 years, it has changed so much in terms of the agriculture landscape, mechanization, road system that provide a better way to get access to the market. So we hope that this continues, and then that a strong seed system that involve private and public will be developed, and the farmers can get engaged in many aspects of production and in collaborating with research institutions. Chhavi, in few words, what is your opinion on this?
In my opinion, like simplified material transfer agreement should be done there. What can we do? Sharpening and by refinement of the training program. For example, training should be arranged with age-wise and education-wise. Provision of regular engagement of farmers group in each government institution with effective monitoring and evaluation framework. And by improving communication ability of farmer organizations so that they are able to stabilize frequent contact with National Agriculture Research Institute. By creating robust database about farmers organization in different areas need to be done by government institution. At present, this information is quite limited and mostly available to the individuals, but not to the institutions. And in last, I think public-private partnership involving government institutions and farmers organization with establishment of business model where farmers group can start seed business. This will give new incentive to farmers to engage more with agriculture institutions. Thank you.
Thanks. Anne, what about in Kenya?
Yeah. Actually, that is the way to go, because now we have been seeing research contracting farmers to do seed multiplication. We have been seeing research working closely with the Cereal Growers Association, and we are moving forward into training farmer groups to be our disseminators. So that is the way to go, working in partnership and forming platforms. And within these platforms, we include more farmers We bring the farmer groups, the farmer associations, the cereal growers associations, among others. And as I said before, we have to inform farmers. We start involving them from way down, problem identification. Because as we talk of interventions, it's like going to a hospital. The doctor cannot give you medicine without knowing what the problem that you have. So before you start intervening, you have to first treat the farmer as the patient and work closely with them from the problem identification all the way to intervention. Because if we start bringing up the partnerships at the top, we are not going to get the impact that we expect. But we start partnerships just like when we are like starting the problem identification, when we are developing the proposals, so that whatever we are developing is demand driven. We are doing this for the farmers. So partnerships, yes, that's the way to go. They have already started, they are already going on, and we can see this in the Cereal Growers Association, in the farmer groups, like in Kenya, which multipliers are farmers. And now we are saying these farmers should be both men and women. We want the women farmer groups to start seed multiplication, and we are training them towards that. That is the way to go ahead.
Thank you, Anne. I really, really like the idea that not just for the farmer, but with the farmer. Definitely, that's the way forward. Bill, can you share with your experience, what do you think can we expect in the UK or other countries in Europe too?
Well, today I'm very fortunate. I'm privileged. I live in a country which has invested in the BGRI through the DFID, and I'm delighted that that has happened. But there are things that we can learn from coronavirus 19. I found it fascinating that our supermarkets were cleared of basic food ingredients, as were those of Europe as well. And it just shows the panic that people get into when they fear that there is insufficient food. And I've been privileged. I've been to all of the countries mentioned today and met so many wonderful people, so many women farmers as well. And when you hear the humbling stories of how they can now afford to take their children to school, which they couldn't do before, and this all comes back. So there is a political message, unfortunately, and that is that we're all in this together. And we were being able to release as a world community resources to try and fight the coronavirus. We really need to have those thought processes when we want to defeat hunger. I'm embarrassed that 800,000 people a day go to bed hungry. That's really not acceptable. And I think that sufficient food is actually the greatest ambassador for world peace. So I think that the way to progress this, to collaborate between the sort of farmer organizations, research organizations, and the plant breeders, is to galvanize all the talent that we have available, and raise the priority of food production, not just wheat, but other staples such as rice, in order that we can end up with a more peaceful world, a world where people will not seek to migrate to avoid starvation. So I would dearly love to see a coordinated and a stronger worldwide investment. And I would like to see European colleagues, because although we are not going to be in the European Union, we're still Europeans. And I'd like to see more investment coming into organizations like the BGRI. But also we mustn't forget the other skill sets that are required, such as agronomy and management, seed production. It's not just about breeding, it's bringing everything together. If we can do that for coronavirus 19, surely we should be able to do that for wheat.
Thanks so much for that, Bill. So, and you're so right. We need to take a holistic view to the problems that we're facing. We heard it today, an inclusive system that includes men and women, an inclusive system that looks into not just delivering seed, delivering varieties, but also thinking into seed. You know, how are we going to make those seed reach farmers' fields? How that yield potential that we have in the research station can be achieved in farmer fields. So we need to look at a holistic approach that really will take the research that we are investing in, that is so important, and it can respond to the needs of not only now, but the future, but really make sure that everybody participates of that the benefit of science. And like I just said, science, it needs to be science-based. We need to be guided by science, but science should not forget that our clientele is the human race, and it's food security. It's not only food security, it's improving livelihoods. The farmer doesn't just want to eat, they want it to thrive. So let's work on that together. So I'll have time for a couple of questions, but before we go into the questions, I want to tell the audience, I know we are running out of time, so we are going to stay a few minutes later. So if you want to continue be part of the conversation, please stay on for a few more questions after 11:30. So Matt Hayes, can you give me some feedback from the chats? I know it has been pretty busy. I've been checking it every now and then. So thanks to all of you that are putting your information there.
Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening to everyone in our global audience. We've had lots of activity on our chats. One question that came up early was the fact that wheat breeders rely on a diversity of germplasm to introduce new genes to combat diseases. The commenter noted that there's increasingly restrictive national access laws that might be hampering breeders' abilities to introduce these genes. Can we have someone comment on what we're seeing in terms of the global rules regarding germplasm exchange?
I would like to pass this question to Hans and Vijay, if you can comment on that.
Okay, now. Well, thank you very much for this question, because this I'm also extremely concerned about it. In wheat, we have still a relatively open community where germplasm is shared. And only because of this sharing of information and germplasm, in my opinion, wheat remains a very competitive crop. We need to continue to do this. But currently, I see a lot of restrictions coming which restrict germplasm exchange and access to germplasm. And I think this is a very counterproductive issue. This issue is also looked at FAO. We have the Standard Material Transfer Agreement, which guides the access to germplasm, but there are also very different interpretations. And this is so important that I really hope that over the coming years, we find a solution to assure that germplasm remains freely accessible. For wheat, I also can say that CIMMYT manages the biggest wheat gene bank in the world. We have about 150 to 160,000 accessions, and these accessions remain freely available. But we need to watch that germplasm in the future remains open and freely accessible, because in my opinion, roughly 50% of the gains we made for the different traits come from sharing germplasm and knowledge other people have identified and lines developed, and by sharing all benefit. So I hope we can maintain free germplasm exchange.
Yeah, I think I endorse what Hans says. I think on the one hand, I think we are much more, flexible and improved in sharing molecular data, genomic tools for a wider global application. I think the whole bioproperty, the genetic property, has been limited by, restrictive practices on account of some of the national biodiversity laws under the Convention for Biodiversity. But I guess there's a need to relook at, these blocks and see how movement of germplasm can be much more global clearly. That's important. Clear.
Thanks, Vijay. Going back to Matt.
Thanks, Maricelis. There was some interest in the seed village model, and a question came up, how can these be made more sustainable and who manages them?
Yeah, I think the sustainability comes by the farmer engagement collectively and an economic model of 360-degree, where all the way from the breeder seed to the end market, there are stakeholders connected to each other. The breeder seed producing organization, the farmer networks that are producing certified seed, and the private seed companies which actually distribute the seed back to the farmers. So I think that network is critical for it to be sustained. It's also shared resources for shared prosperity, which is important. So, small farmers can't afford owning their own seed dispensation units or combines. So we have models where service providers take care of the shared resource need, and that itself provides enterprise model as such that is sustainable by itself. Third thing is, of course, the infrastructure that runs profitably. These are essential that, nothing is subsidized in this process. So they do have their seed operating unit run to good capacity, well maintained and standards maintained, adopted, safety systems adopted, run it to capacity. So these are essential for operations that are profitable. So in the end, farmers should make money. I guess the operating entities should sustain itself, and that's what's important there.
Thanks for that, Vijay.